What up? It's Christopher Sweat from Graystack Media. I'm standing here at Oak Street Beach. So if you've been to Chicago, then you know exactly where I'm at right now. But if you haven't, you've probably seen this shot from all the famous movies that have been filmed here over the last 40 or 50 years. One of the most pressing topics occurring right now in the business community is if you're a US multinational corporation that's doing business almost anywhere, but especially in Asia or the Middle East, even Europe, there's becoming this like wider spread negative sentiment towards Americans. And it's actually putting a lot of pressure on American operators abroad. One of the number one challenges that American operators face abroad is this idea that hard power is for the strong and soft power is for the weak. What this means is that the United States has been very focused on hard power intervention. And where this became extraordinarily evident was 9/11. So basically, what changed in America's foreign policy and national security posture around 9/11 was that the United States made an argument that it could defend itself by striking first. And this is known as the Bush Doctrine, or what is also known as offensive realism. And so what we did was we spent basically the last like 24 years trying to change the negative perceptions that were shaped by the types of intervention that we did and the ways that we broke international law. Look at the interventions in Libya, in Mogadishu, in Afghanistan, in Iraq. Basically, we spent trillions of dollars on war, but American companies have really not received any benefits, more have had to deal with the negative consequences that this type of foreign policy has created in the international system. You could probably argue that 30 years ago, America could carry out whatever wars that it wanted, and it didn't necessarily affect the business community in a tremendous way. But think about this. When the Russia-Ukraine war started, American and European multinational companies lost over $100 billion. Okay, so the war is starting to cost corporate industry significantly more than ever. And then on top of that, U.S. intervention has created these like very negative sentiments that are actually adding up to what we're seeing in Israel and Gaza. And the key issue there is that people are super sick and tired of American intervention, American third-party intervention, or even just the kind of like funding and shipment of weapon systems. So when we talk to defense contractors that are doing foreign direct investment in different parts of the Middle East and Asia, what they're sharing with us is that there is a lot of negative sentiment around their presence and around perceptions of the US government, which can make it really hard to establish formal relationships in the local markets where they're doing business. And then they would like to achieve some type of alignment with the federal government so that they have maybe a better operating environment in the foreign country that they're working in. But they also cite that they don't even have a liaison in a lot of the places that they're doing development or deploying American capital and resources. And so what you have is a lot of frustration with the way that the foreign policy of the United States is shaping the global economy. And to make it worse, China and Russia are significantly more competitive in these areas in the Middle East and Asia. So it's basically creating downward pressure on these US operators because, again, like I said beforehand, 30 years ago, the US operators didn't face a lot of competition from China and Russia. Okay, so now you have these spheres of geopolitical competition where Russia might be providing some kind of security and China may be providing some kind of capital and technology. And then the American operators are going into this environment. This is like the new global economy. And they're struggling to compete, but they're also not getting the backing of their own federal government. Okay. So there's like this division between the types of foreign policies that are being implemented and what that is supposedly achieving, and the physical reality, the physical constraints that American companies are dealing with operating abroad. Okay, so the first challenge, like I said earlier, is American foreign policy. The second challenge for American operators is, well, it's Donald Trump. And contrary to MAGA supporters, or maybe the kind of like popular sentiment, Trump has implemented a number of policies that are increasing the cost for American operators abroad, and also just increasing the cost for American operators domestically. Basically, the way that he has been implementing his various tariff policies, where he makes numbers up and then says what the tariff is going to be, and then says everyone's negotiating with him, and a lot of those negotiations don't even take place. But what he's doing is creating this kind of like cadence of reactions all throughout the international system. And it's actually really hard to gauge like where his policies are going. He claims that increasing tariffs is also a mechanism for increasing the attractiveness of manufacturing in the United States. But in reality, if the increase in tariffs increases inflation, then making foreign direct investment in the American manufacturing sector actually becomes really unattractive, because you don't want to make foreign direct investment in an inflationary environment. On top of that, if you look at the current status of American factories, there's already a skills shortage. So there's already a lack of labor supply available in the current form of manufacturing. Now, if you were to create a new factory in the United States and make it more modern, you'd have even a larger skills gap than you do today. Many of these skills are in different parts of Asia, China, Taiwan, India, etc. But almost none of these skills for the very like modern factory model exist in the United States. So Trump basically espouses a policy, doesn't have any kind of like grand strategy to complement the policy, or any type of funding, right? Like, where's his industrial policy where he's going to actually have the federal government work with the businesses to build these new modern factories? Nobody knows. He says that he's got trillions of dollars of foreign direct investment lined up from like SoftBank and some of these other corporates that have some money to throw around. But when and how are they directing that capital? We haven't seen it. And again, how modern can our manufacturing sector become? We're standing in a city, Chicago, that had its peak population in 1950. And since the kind of decline of the manufacturing sector through the 50s, again in the 90s, again in the 2000s, its population has declined. Not just Chicago, but really the entire Rust Belt from Chicago to Pennsylvania. And then, so it's a very unattractive infrastructure that we have for this supposed increase in manufacturing that Donald Trump is talking about. And he creates a level of uncertainty in the domestic economy that is making a lot of companies start to pull back on their spending. Some companies are actually firing people. And then you're seeing tons of layoffs across different government bureaucracies. And we actually need these bureaucracies to function and kind of complement what we're doing in the private sector. and we just don't have that kind of coordination right now. So a lot of businesses that I'm talking to feel left in the dark. And so one of our objectives is to create some new models for analysis that kind of cut through all the previous heuristics that you see in political science and try to help people make the decision before the fact, right? So being able to present the phenomena as it emerges and seeing it emerge at a more local level instead of waiting to it emerges at a country level in the news media, right? And then everyone overreacts. So, we've been thinking really creatively about how to get those managers the insights that they need so that they can make better decisions in this current chaotic environment. Uh, and it, not to mention the chaoticness of the president, but just all the changes that are taking place in the international system. Now we're going to talk about Russia and China and this newer, more intense geopolitical competition. In the political science field, international relations, you have this way of thinking about the international system or the global economy. So people will argue that from 1970 to 2019, this is the period where the US was the strongest. And they call this period the liberal international order, where for the most part, the United States could enact its will in the international system unilaterally, so unchallenged, okay? Something changed in 2019 as China became more powerful and assertive, and we saw China through its Belt and Road Initiative, where it started to build infrastructure all throughout Asia and even into Europe, okay? To support increased development and increased connectivity from the Chinese economy to a number of foreign partners. And from Russia, what we've seen is that they have co-opted counterterrorism in Africa and also started to expand their influence in Africa. But inherently what they've done is actually marginalize the influence of the French. The French are the most influential country in the European Union. And so right now, French global influence is declining, which also means that European influence is declining. So so now the way that the US and China situation is kind of added up is it started as proxy wars. So the U.S. would put in place certain types of sanction policies to prevent the flow of goods from China. And so they would target corporations. Then China would go and do the same and make it very hard for U.S. companies to be competitive in China. Some of the biggest examples of this is like you can see Amazon, who failed to enter the market in China. You can see Google, who only has somewhere around 7 to 12% market share in China, which is being eroded slowly. And then even in the EU now, we have this kind of new proxy fight where European Union regulators and some domestic regulators like in the UK, Germany, France, are coming up with new creative ways to react to Trump policy that are putting a lot of pressure on the American technology sector. And then, look at like the U.S. exit from Afghanistan. So we spent a couple $1 trillion on war in Afghanistan, and then we actually exited in 2021. What we did was we took the government away from the Taliban. We set up a U.S.-led Afghan government, which was basically like the test of building a democracy in Afghanistan. And then in 2021, we completely abandoned Afghanistan and the Taliban was able to take over. Well, if you zoom into Afghanistan at the country level, you do have some U.S. operators putting capital into Afghanistan. And then you have some British and some Asian money flowing into Afghanistan. But what you have is you have Russia setting up a sort of security, and you have China who is providing certain types of technologies to complement that security. And then you have China who is actively looking to increase the flow of capital into the Afghanistan economy, as well as Russia. And it seems like at this current rate, China is at this pace where it is close to giving Afghanistan international recognition. Okay. But where is the US on this matter? They're nowhere to be found.